From Rabobank, this is a RaboResearch food and agribusiness podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Consumer Foods to Go Wrap, where we wrap up a month in the food industry. As always, we have Maria and Tom joining me to discuss, the big themes for the month of January in this case. So hi Maria, how are you?
Hi Cyrille, hi Tom. Always a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, great to see you, Tom, as well, with your nice microphone shining, the yellow thing.
Yes. Happy microphone.
Happy microphone.
Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Happy microphone.
This is for viewers only, of course. If you're listening, you're missing out on a lot. So great. As the frequent listeners know, we follow a menu. This was the hello and welcome and wait to be seated part of the menu, and we immediately moved to what happened in January. And some of you might have listened to the previous podcast that we did, or videocast, and we looked at the year ahead. And January has been incredibly busy. By the way, we're not going to discuss any geopolitical issues or things that are happening, because we are recording this on the 23rd of January, and tomorrow might be a very different day again. So we are steering away from geopolitics. We do know that it has an impact on food businesses, but the environment changes so quickly. But Maria, I'd like to start up with you, because you wanted to share some interesting observations on Christmas selling, which is important.
Yeah, sure. Well, just as Christmas is such an important month, both for food retailers, for food services, and we start to have the first information coming on about how did it go, it shows very clearly how the consumer is going all over the place, how polarized the behavior is of consumers. Just two examples. We've started to get information about France. And in France, the typical French Christmas products, and think about foie gras, oysters, smoked salmon, were selling extremely slowly, which is worrisome. Fresh produce were doing well, by the way, but then when we go to the most indulgent products, confectionery, all these sweets, stuff like that, what consumers were doing is perhaps buying a bit less, perhaps not, but clearly going for the expensive options, the premium brands, etc. I'm talking about food retailing grocers, so
Sure.
not in specialty shops. So they were trying to save perhaps in their foie gras, but then suddenly going full Monty when they were buying a sweet. This is a clear example of polarized behavior, not trading down, not trading up, just going all over the place. And the second one is the UK, where the first numbers are also coming through. And it seems that in food retail, volumes were down. So any increase year on year was just price driven. But food services has done quite well. We keep getting announcements of different operators saying that they had strong like-for-like sales during the holidays period, pubs in particular, some of them even double-digit like-for-like sales. So again, we see some kind of polarized pattern during the Christmas season. Let's see how it ends up for every other country, for every specific segment, every specific player. But the big lines are as confusing as I put now in front of you.
and that's probably true. It is truly a mixed bag where, the discounters, the hard discounters in the UK did well. Some of the premium retailers did well, which is perhaps the K-shaped recovery that we're seeing. But as you said, food service is doing well. It is difficult to sort of assess properly.
Exactly. And perhaps what we are seeing now, having gone through the whole 2024 already, is just the confirmation of the new paradigm.
Yeah.
That is the new normal. So we should start to think completely different when we try to analyze or just sort of shape our expectations.
Yes, which is important for businesses as well.
Indeed.
Yes. Moving to the US, Tom, an important announcement on the 6th of January. Something was launched. What was it?
The new GLP-1 or the dietary guidelines?
Well, well, both were important. By the way, we'll talk about the dietary guidelines later. Let's pick the first one, GLP-1.
So the GLP-1 pill, has come to the market. We've been talking about it, anticipating it for some time. Uptake in GLP-1s is already, 10 to 12%. Some are reporting up to 14%.
Yeah.
There is a bit of a range on the numbers, but one thing a pill does is ensure that number is going to go higher.
Yes.
And we're already seeing impacts of GLP-1 coming through in terms of sales data, traffic, and so on.
By the way, for those that haven't been paying attention to the food sector, and I'm sure that most listeners have been paying attention, but for those that haven't, GLP-1s means, anti-obesity medications such as Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, Zepbound, you name it. Just for those that were unaware. Go ahead, Tom.
That's exactly right. Thanks. Yes, it's not a household name just yet, but it's certainly having more and more of an impact on households. And that's one of the points is the halo effect that we've talked about with clients and in reports. That halo effect means somebody in a household on GLP-1 typically has an impact on what the rest of the household is eating. What we do see typically, and again, there's new information coming out almost every day on consumers and GLP-1 usage, but they eat more proteins, they eat more fresh fruits and vegetables, they eat fewer calories, they tend to stray towards healthier, better for you foods, which, to my point about the dietary guidelines, they kind of naturally puts them on that sort of path, which I'm sure we'll come back to.
Yes.
But to Maria's point, to kind of tie it together also, we do see a little bit of premiumizing that can occur also. I've talked to friends on taking GLP-1s, and we've also read it in studies. Sometimes because they're spending less on calories overall, when they do choose to spend, they might choose something a little nicer because the eating experience isn't quite what it used to be. So when I do eat, I want it to be extra good.
Yeah.
So that might be a fancier piece of beef. Maybe it's a Wagyu instead, or maybe you're going out to a slightly fancier restaurant, or you're ordering up just a little bit and premiumizing. So GLP-1 is having an impact across the board as far as what people are eating, how much they're eating, where they're eating it, and how their household's eating altogether. So it has a premiumizing effect. It can have a halo effect. It's changing the way things work. But proteins, I think, are just another very big theme that tie into GLP-1s, and it probably is a good segue to fiber. But what we've seen with the proteins, and Coke's CEO maybe it was yesterday, but just recently, Coke's CEO has come out and said how strong protein demand has been for them in their Fairlife portfolio. And part of this is GLP-1 users actually going to Fairlife's Core Power and other Fairlife type products. But I had a quick look at the numbers. Fairlife's total sales were up 22% last year. Core Power, which is within the Fairlife portfolio, is up 32%. And Coke is in the process, and in this year should complete its plant expansion on capacity for these types of products. So full steam ahead for proteins, full steam ahead for GLP-1s. That's what I'm seeing so far as we kick off 2026.
Yes, and as we said in the previous podcast, this still is the year, or another year, of GLP-1 stories and impact on food. It's the pill, and Novo Nordisk is not the only one coming out with a pill. Eli Lilly will as well. It is the second wave in the US, when the reimbursement through Medicaid and Medicare might come in April, and Europe.
Yes,
we will see the pickup here coming. We already saw it in the UK, which might be part of the numbers that Maria quoted before in the UK. But it's slowly but gradually, but definitely spreading throughout Europe. So definitely an interesting another year on GLP-1s.
A good point. And one more thing I want to add, Cyrille, and those are great points. This is the second, we could call it the second wave of GLP-1s with the pills coming. There's a third wave. There's other GLP-1 like products that are not a GLP-1 that are coming to the market also. So that's around the corner. So just when we get ourselves situated with what this pill actually means, then we're going to have a whole host of new potential GLP-1 like protein, or not proteins, but products coming to the market that will have another impact that we're going to have to talk about. So keep watching this space. It's evolving.
Related to that is my topic for January, and it was around last year as well, but it came much more to the forefront, I guess, in January, which is fiber maxing, which
Okay. Yeah.
is because, and this is back to the GLP-1 story, people that are GLP-1s consume more protein, and they also are likely to consume more fibers. And fiber maxing has been a story on social media, especially TikTok, for which the three of us might be a bit too old, but my kids were talking about it, as in that this is a trend that they've seen appearing, which is just eating more fibers. And let's look at the US population. In general, the US population doesn't eat enough fiber. So adding more fibers, whether it's through breads or fruits, is actually a good thing. But it's now becoming a trend, which is really, really interesting. And it may not come to fruition or to the market in the ways that we are used to it, as indeed to fruits or to wholemeal bread or to other shapes. Drinks with fiber, dairy products with added fiber. Beyond Meat launched a drink. Beyond Meat, the meat substitutes company, they launched a drink with added fiber, which is tapioca that they used as the ingredient in there. That happened in January, I think, playing into this trend of not only protein but also adding fiber, and in social media terms, that is fiber maxing. So we will see more of that, and the prebiotic trend, because that in a sense is what it is, been around for a while, and some companies have been playing into this. PepsiCo buying was it Poppy or Olipop? One of the two, I always forget. But one of those carbonated soft drinks that have some prebiotic qualities. I think that is where we'll see a lot of activity and action this year as well on the M&A side. Going back to last podcast where we did talk about M&A, this could be an area of intention for us to look into.
Just going to the fiber, it started to be a hype, or at least let's not a hype, but to be much more frequently mentioned on the media, on the press, etc. Probably since after the summer. But the point is that the first wave, or at least the wave in the general media, not TikTok, which is indeed I'm a bit too old for.
Yeah, but many people aren't.
Exactly. Mostly the focus was on fresh products, which is great and probably the healthiest way to get the fiber, not discussion there. But this is what we already have been hearing for years. Eat more fruit, eat more vegetables, etc. And perhaps it's not the way to encourage certain part of the population to take more fiber. So the fact that now it is being taken over by processed food, processed drinks, this is a delta. This is a change in the story compared to all the old messages, all the buzzwords, even if they were reinforced in September about fiber. This is now a different way of taking your fiber.
Agreed. Yes. No, so this is one to watch out for, and I'm sure we'll do a wrap-up show after Natural Products Expo West, which Tom, you will visit in early March.
Yes.
And I'm just already the cliffhanger here, perhaps, or for you to look into is how many fiber maxing products that you will find at the show. But I'm sure it's many, next to all the protein products that you probably will see as well.
You get your protein, you get your fiber. They go together very well.
Tom, please look careful, because whatever you see now in Expo West, we will see in Europe in 1 or 2 years.
That's what it is. Yeah, absolutely. So take pictures, Tom. We might share them here. I'm not sure whether that's possible. We need to look into that, whether we can actually share pictures during the video recording that we do. We might.
We'll figure it out.
This was the menu part of the podcast, as in what we found interesting and new happening in the last month. So this action-packed month, I must say, generated already a lot of things happening, and one cliffhanger with the dietary guidelines, which we'll come to now in the special section, which is recent RaboResearch that we think is worth mentioning here in the podcast. Because it deserves the attention. Because it talks about a topic that is new, novel, or interesting, and potentially a game changer. Our colleague JP did a report on the back of the dietary guidelines that came out in early January. And Tom, can you perhaps talk a bit about the dietary guidelines, summarize what those are, and also what our views is, and what JP basically, what message he conveyed in the note.
Well, yeah, we're finally, JP did a great job, summarizing what's going on out there and taking it to what it means for consumers and our clients. But, the dietary guidelines are kind of following what's already going in terms of trends that we're discussing here already. Consumers are already moving in that direction. This just puts some sort of structure and formality around it, I think. Eat real food is the main message, the explicit warning to avoid ultra processed foods. Which, you wonder, what is an ultra processed food? Well, we have more clarity. It's non-nutritive ingredients, added sugars and salts. We're seeing, refined carbs under attack a little more. So, some areas to avoid. And then again, back to real food. The recommendation is a little more explicit around protein. So somebody my size is about 110 to 150 grams of protein a day. So that's I should be eating apparently about 2 to 3 steaks if I were to just put my protein in a steak. Or if we're talking about that core power drink that I mentioned, or a high protein drink, it's 3 to 4 of those types of protein beverages a day, which is quite a lot of protein.
Yes.
If I'm honest. And also, they talk about full fat. That's back in schools. So some time ago, full fat milk was removed from schools. And interestingly, we saw a decline in milk consumption when full fat milks were removed. And if you know anything about dairy and milk, when you take the fat out, it doesn't taste quite as good. So bringing fat back into schools will be an interesting thing to watch. That could actually put another tailwind under milk demand in the US, bringing milk back a little bit, real milk back a little bit. If kids are starting to drink or have access to to whole milk, they might enjoy it a little more. So I might be biased. I like whole milk, but I think that's an interesting thing to watch. So full fat dairy specifically, back in action. Proteins back in action. Limiting added sugars is something else that's been called out. Again, I said avoid refined carbs.
Yes.
And animal fats, specifically butter and tallow, beef tallow, are kind of on their way. As far as the implications for various sectors, I'll just quickly run through what JP highlighted, because I think it's fascinating and great summarization of what it means for the food supply chain. So for dairy, it's a tailwind. The dietary guidelines I'd describe as a tailwind. Sugars, it's a headwind. Sugars are, added sugars in particular, headwind. Seed oils and vegetable oils, it is a bit mixed. So some of your less processed are okay. Some of your highly processed seed oils, reformulation, and so there will be reformulation in terms of products, moving to avocado oils, which we're already seeing in the market. Those types of substitutions we see coming. Bakery products, bit of reformulation required there. Meat and poultry, very strong tailwind for those proteins. Fresh fruits and vegetables, strong tailwind. And alcohol was also highlighted. And there's I would say kind of a minimal change to what perceptions are around alcohol based on these guidelines, where they're saying there's no definitive sort of mark on how much you should or shouldn't drink. Whereas previously, I think it was avoid. Now it's kind of like, well, just in moderation. So not a big shift or change there. So the bottom line, to get to the main point, it's going to accelerate existing trends that we're already talking about. Proteins, protein continues to be there, and fiber with the fresh fruits and vegetables, full fat dairy, cleaner food products.
Yes.
It's going to put pressure on sugars, refined grains, processed snacks, and processed meats. This puts unique pressure on the supply chain. So the cold chain specifically, if we're seeing less center aisle, highly processed foods, it means more stocking, more cold chain utilization. So something to think about in that capacity. And then lastly, innovation. I wrote a report several years ago about the end of disruptive innovation and said we're going to shift to incremental. And innovation overall has been lower just because of cost issues in the supply chain. Innovation comes back though. So incremental innovation specifically, as companies have to reformulate to adjust to these new dietary guidelines. So that's the a slightly long-winded overview of the report, but a lot to unpack there.
A lot to unpack, and of course the direct impact mostly is on the governmental spending or system in the US. As and you mentioned schools, where they might follow the dietary guidelines. Perhaps the military might follow the dietary guidelines. What it means for the average American, not as much, I guess. They may or may not follow them, but
they're already following them
that's also
effectively.
true.
I mean, a lot of consumer trends are already kind of going. In historically, it's hard to say how much these influence the actual consumer. But you're right. The school purchasing programs, the military, institutional usage, it does influence that. Yeah. So big thing to watch there.
No, so dear listener, dear viewer, please reach out to us to get that report, because there's even more than just in there than Tom just summarized. But I think it's a great report to see what the implications are of the new dietary guidelines in the US. Nice one. It is so fascinating. This is slightly off piste here, but quite a bit of what's in there is science based, but not everything. The fact what you mentioned around alcohol consumption. I believe in the previous dietary guidelines, it was 2 glasses of alcohol for a male and 1 for a female on a daily basis. And now it is
That's right.
Consume less, whatever that may mean. So, which is, well, maybe a lobby, I don't know, but it's definitely not. I don't think it's science-based, because there's more and more evidence coming out that alcohol is bad in any amount that you would take it. But fascinating and interesting to follow. Maria, there's another one report that we launched, which I think is really interesting, and it has potentially global implications. It started all with cocoa prices, different topic, with cocoa prices skyrocketing, and they have come down a bit, but people looking for alternatives. So our colleague Julia wrote a report on the alternatives that are being developed for cocoa, but that might give you the same experience as cocoa in chocolate. What's the key message, Maria?
Now, talking about innovation, Tom, this is about innovation, and perhaps not everything is entirely new. Something has been under development for a bit of time, but indeed cocoa prices made it escalate.
Yes.
Julia, our colleague, has written a report that is called Beyond the Bean, plus. I don't know the entire title by heart, sorry. And it explores the alternatives to cocoa in the processed food. Basically, lab-grown cocoa or fermented products that emulate the characteristics of cocoa chocolate, or upcycled or products that again emulate the cocoa or the chocolate from upcycled materials. So this is interesting. Some of them were already up and running, like Choviva is one of these fermented products. But what it makes it even more interesting is the fact that large corporates involved in the chocolate industry are pretty much getting involved in it. And keep in mind that the general trend in the last couple of years has been for large corporates to step back from innovation, from incubators, etc. Well, this is going on the opposite direction. And we have the search of Barrical about, but we also have the leading Japanese the leading Japanese Meiji, difficult to remember how to pronounce it, the leading Japanese chocolate. And we have Lindt, even quality chocolate, premium chocolate, all involved and joining these kind of startups or innovating companies. Why? Because there is a clear use, perhaps, of these alternative products, which is probably not in the chocolate tablet or the pralines, but definitely when chocolate is used as an ingredient for coating, for fillings, in other products in bakery. And above anything else, because these companies clearly are concerned about the long-term availability of cocoa beans, of cocoa. So I encourage everybody that is somewhat related with the issue, either because they supply chocolate products, they are buyers, they are on bakery or in food service, to have a look at the report because it really is a very structured note looking at all the different possibilities that are now in the market,
Yeah.
what are the pros and cons, and where can they be used at present already.
Good. Yes, fascinating. Well, as I said, cocoa prices have come down quite a bit because harvests seem to be much better than initially expected. It is interesting to see that this search for alternatives might actually produce some very interesting results. And so buyers might be looking at it also because we don't know, as you point out already, what cocoa prices might do or what harvest might be in the future.
Now, keep in mind that they have come down a lot, but cocoa remains expensive.
Correct.
And it remains very vulnerable to weather issues, etc. It has become the supply of cocoa has become even more volatile and uncertain than what it already was.
Yeah.
So it is clearly something interesting for all the companies. Plus, there are the sustainability issues, of course.
Yes, absolutely. Alrighty, so those are the specials, two of the reports that we launched in January that are definitely worth reading. So again, please feel free to reach out to us to get copies of those reports. Well, let's go to the made to order section. And in the beginning, I said, well, we're not going to talk geopolitics. Well, actually, we are, but not necessarily in that we can predict what will happen tomorrow. We are much more, and this is a question that was asked to us a few times, especially I must say in Europe in recent weeks. On, there's all these geopolitical events, but the impact on the food sector might be limited-ish. The whole Greenland story, which is politically very, very sensitive, the economies would be impacted only in a very minor way. If Greenland would have gone to the US, which currently is no longer the case, the economies would have been impacted in a limited way, and consumers probably continue to spending on food. So the question we've been asked, and also been sort of asking ourselves, is what would actually lead to a real disruption in consumer? So Maria, what geopolitical event would come to your mind in saying, okay, if that happens, then we have a problem?
Okay, now the most obvious is, of course, if we were to be directly involved in a war scenario,
Yes.
where actually our folks had to go, that would be very, very bad. But let's be reasonable, and I think that is not a scenario that we can contemplate as
No.
something that may happen soon. So what I see much more likely to affect consumers is not something specifically geopolitical, but the implications that all these geopolitical sort of happenings may have in the local domestic politics. The most clear example is if Europe is to increase spending in defense. There are a couple of things that happen. This budget has to come from somewhere. So that would mean perhaps increasing the public debt, and that has an impact on interest rates. Or that may be that the budgets are reshuffled, and therefore there is less money for fiscal support or increased taxes. And either way, the consumer would be affected. So I think right now, and perhaps not so much for 26, because for at least a few countries, the budgets are already approved and signed, but going forward into the medium term, it's the impact on local politics and on fiscal policies
Yes.
that the current global situation may have.
Yeah. No, agreed. Yeah. So I fully agree. A full-scale war that would have a big impact. Perhaps if something would happen around Taiwan, that would also impact consumer sentiment for quite some time, also because of the inflationary effects that would have. But otherwise, I'm less convinced that we will have a massive impact. It will be, as you said, interest rates. That's an important one, and that could stop the recovery that we might be seeing in some countries. Yes.
Yeah, so fiscal or interest, but that is actually more the impact at domestic level, domestic politics.
Yeah.
And we already started to see that, Cyrille, at least in Europe, that domestic politics started to shape more consumer behavior or at least consumer confidence in the recent times than general geopolitics.
Yes, I agreed. And another implication, if I might add, is, and this is not necessarily consumer related, but it is business related, is that I'm picking up more and more stories, and currently it's stories because countries may not want to publish about it just yet, but that countries are asking companies to think about self-sufficiency, because let's think about it. In Europe, in the UK, it's definitely not self-sufficient. The Nordics may not be self-sufficient. Some other countries, including the Netherlands, they have an abundance at least of some products, including dairy. But that is a theme. That is a theme, as in, okay, in a scenario that we would have war, which hopefully will not happen, and so that the percentage of it happening is small, what can countries themselves do to prepare for that and to become, at least to start thinking about self-sufficiency? And it's in food. It's also in non-food, of course, with defense spending and all that, which is also on the agenda, as you said before. So that is for businesses something to really think about, and as in how can food businesses support governmental. It's not official actions; it's more rumors, or it's not rumors, but yeah, whispers. I think whispers is what I was looking for. But how can you support the whispers, and that companies are looking for self-sufficiency? Self-sufficiency. I think really interesting. Tom, anything from a US perspective?
So the tariffs obviously remain, and they're used as a leverage in negotiation. We've just seen it again, and it creates a lot of uncertainty throughout the supply chain, all the way through to the consumer, worrying about foods. It creates behavioral shifts from, conservation, just stocking up for the rainy day, so that sort of behavioral stuff. Ever since the pandemic, you kind of get these like frenzied purchasing patterns where people stock up, and it goes up the supply chain too. It's importers and exporters. They'll adjust and stock up inventories if they see a risk on the horizon like that. So that has impacts throughout food. Then you also see behavioral shift from the consumer in terms of, well, I want to enjoy my life. I there's so much noise, there's so much disruption. I want to live. I want to go out and I want to enjoy my meals. And we've seen that again and again. So that some of those behavioral things, that the chaos in the global political structure and the paradigm shifts, whatever we're going through, has an impact throughout the supply chain. And again, at the end of the day, it matters what the consumer is doing. Yeah. And I'll talk about that just a little more. 70% of the US GDP is driven by the consumer and their spending. So that's a very important part of the US situation. And when we talk about all these disruptions in it affecting their spending, that has an impact on the GDP at the end of the day, quite a big one. So I want to highlight that. And then also, if how are these tariffs, where the US has collected some pretty large sums of money, how is that going to be redistributed or used in the US? There's been talks of kind of paying out to the consumers, putting it in the consumer wallet. Then we talk about inflation again. Then we also talk about trading up and hyper premiumization, where consumers could suddenly spend on very premium products and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, there's just so much going on. There's a lot of constant change. We're dealing with a lot of noise as consumers, and then in what we do, trying to analyze what's going on. It's really, it's every day there's something different to talk about that's changing our system. So keeping your ear to the ground, understanding what's going on, I think that these discussions are very useful for us and for our clients to stay on top of.
Yes, a lot of noise, but also some fundamental shifts, potentially at least, around the geopolitical situation. Okay, time to ask for the bill and to wrap up. Thanks, is I think what I would like to say, Maria and Tom. It's been hugely insightful again, because I hopefully the audience learned a lot of new stuff, but also reiteration of topics that we've been talking about for quite a bit of time. GLP-1s, geopolitics are very important, and perhaps also the difficulty that we as analysts have around how the consumer is behaving right now, because it's just a mixed bag in Europe to an extent, and also in the US. So that is, I think those are three of the themes that we're talking about for a while. And of course, food tech potentially coming back in the cocoa space. I think that's another interesting one. It's a somewhat smaller topic, but it's interesting to mention. And again, dear listener, dear viewer, if you would like to follow up on that, please let us know. So with that, thank you, Tom. Thank you, Maria. And thank you, dear listener and dear viewer, for downloading, streaming, and watching this episode of Consumer Foods to Go Wrap. And we're looking forward to bringing you a new one at the end of February. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this latest RaboResearch Food and Agribusiness podcast. To hear more up-to-the-minute expert analysis, search for Rabobank on your favorite podcast app and follow our channels. Visit research.rabobank.com for more.